There were students in the occupied Starobilsk and Luhansk region, and they died after a strike by the armed forces of Ukraine. Several Ukrainian publications, which conducted their own independent investigations, have come to this conclusion. And I'll say right away, this will be a difficult episode, so there will be a long preamble to this episode. The topic of the targeted strike by Ukraine's defense forces on the occupied Starobilsk is indeed complicated, and unfortunately, the Russians have managed to turn it into a propaganda trick. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine issued an official report after the strike on Starobilsk on May 22. An important military facility was destroyed there, specifically the headquarters of the Russian electronic warfare and drone unit Rubikon. This is valid and very important. But later, other facts emerged. Civilians were also in the same former dormitory building and died there. These were students from the local college who became hostages of the Russian occupation. This news literally split Ukrainian social media into two camps. On one side, there was radical military pragmatism. They say that everyone who stayed in the occupied territories and received Russian diplomas there is automatically considered a collaborator, and there is no point in feeling sorry for them. On the other hand, there is deep shock from the tragedy and a call not to lose our humanity. You know, I thought for a long time about whether it was even worth bringing this issue to the public and discussing it on this YouTube channel, but in the end I decided to analyze this topic in detail. Why? Because Ukraine is fighting against the savage Russians precisely for values and for the truth. And out of respect for every soldier of the armed forces of Ukraine and every Ukrainian victim of this war, I have no right to be like the Russians who, foaming at the mouth, denied the tragedies in Bucha, Mariupol, or Yelenovka, burying their heads in the sand and shouting about some so-called fakes. After all, we are a mature, civilized society that is capable of facing the truth no matter how bitter it may be. And today, we will find out exactly how Russia cynically uses children in the occupied territories as human shields. Why is the tragedy in Starobilsk primarily a war crime committed by the Kremlin and not by the armed forces of Ukraine, and how does Russian propaganda exploit this tragedy? My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this difficult, truly difficult topic together and figure out what really happened.
Is there a Ukrainian army?
Or don't you understand?
Listen to me.
Now listen carefully. I want you to understand me clearly. If we make such a decision only to protect Ukrainian citizens, and let any of the servicemen try to shoot at their own people, with us standing behind them, not in front but behind, let them try to shoot at women and children. I'd like to see who would give such an order in Ukraine.
So, on the morning of May 22, local telegram channels in the occupied Starobilsk-Luhansk region were indeed flooded with announcements looking for missing boys. Parents and acquaintances searched for those missing after the strike on the pedagogical college dormitory. The first to report this was the publication Realnaya Gazeta, and later other Ukrainian media also wrote about it. And here I will immediately quote that very Realnaya Gazeta. Before analyzing the editorial, the facts, the deceased are real people. Their pages on the VKontakte social network are still open. Some are subscribed to the official group of the Starobilsk Pedagogical College. They posted photos, they had friends, and now there are condolence comments there. Their names match the lists of the deceased published by the Russians. For example, Anastasia Vasilenko posted a short video on her page in March this year. On May 23, the first condolences appeared there. On Alexandra Kovbak's page, there have been comments with condolences and farewell messages for the past 3 days. The last publicly available photo the girl posted was on February 26. Propagandists came to the funeral of 19-year-old Anna Pogrebnichenko and filmed the report with her devastated relatives. People are also leaving words of grief, support, and remembrance on her VKontakte page. The relatives of the deceased Dasha Serdyuk show the propagandists her last message, which she recorded for them after the strike. The last photo that Dasha posted publicly on social media was a photo from her birthday. There is now a wave of mourning under it as well. Telegram channels published a video filmed in the first minutes after the strike. There are few publicly available shots from the scene of the strike on the dormitory. Only a few people filmed the first minutes after the strike, and even fewer shared them. For many years, Russia has systematically purged the information space in Luhansk and Donetsk. Therefore, we may be dealing with propaganda sources. And last year, the leader of the LNR group, Leonid Pasechnik, completely banned publishing photos and videos of the aftermath of attacks. But what really happened in Starobilsk? According to the Russian side, on the night of May 22, Ukrainian drones struck Starobilsk. A dormitory of the Starobilsk College, also known as the so-called Luhansk State Pedagogical University, was partially destroyed. According to the Russians, there were about 80 students there at the time of the strike. 21 people were killed, several dozen were injured. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine stated that the target of the strike was one of the headquarters of the Rubikon unit, a structure of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, which coordinates the development and use of drones. According to the General Staff, the headquarters was located in the administrative buildings of the Institute complex. And here comes the most important thing that you should keep in mind throughout the entire episode. A foreign journalist who visited the site told Medusa that he saw the destroyed building of the Starobilsk Vocational College not far from the dormitory. Let me emphasize, this is very important. Not the pedagogical, but specifically the vocational college. This is very important, because these are two different educational institutions that, due to a strange coincidence, were actually merged into one. But when this foreign journalist wanted to go to this second building, for some reason the Russian security forces did not allow him to inspect it, referring to the fact that no one was hurt there and that journalists had no business there. Like, listen, there's nothing to film there. All the victims are here. Something hit there as well, but there's nothing to show. Moreover, the Russian security forces ordered the journalists to film only within a marked area and forbade them to go beyond the outlined perimeter. But why? The thing is, at one Gogol Square in Starobilsk, there are two educational institutions, the Starobilsk Vocational College and the Starobilsk College of the Luhansk Pedagogical University. They have different administrations, different areas of study, different websites, and even different administrative offices. The Starobilsk Vocational College occupied an old two-story red brick building. The Starobilsk College of the Luhansk Pedagogical University was in a gray 5-story box, but interestingly, the classrooms and dormitories were in the same building. There you go. And one more important marker. Once again, the dormitories and classrooms were in the same building. Why? This is where the most cynical part starts. The Russians were hiding military infrastructure using students as cover. The administration of the pedagogical college actively shared information about college life on social media and showed the students' daily routines in photos. And in those photos, well, of course, you couldn't actually see any soldiers or military equipment. Nothing on the pedagogical college's social media indicates that it was in any way connected to the military. But for some reason, the Starobilsk Vocational College stopped posting photos with students back in September 2025. It is known that the college was not closed, but none of the victims have been identified as its students. And it was precisely at the vocational college that some unclear covert activity was taking place. The Russian security forces simply forbade showing it. No journalists were allowed inside. In the end, Russia managed to use this tragedy. The death toll was first announced personally by the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. He immediately ordered the army to prepare a retaliatory strike. And on the night of May 24, Russia attacked Kiev and the Kiev region, using in particular the Oreshnik missile. Of course, it is doubtful that the Russians were able to prepare a combined attack on the Ukrainian capital in just one day. The Russians turned the aftermath of the strike on Starobilsk into a media show. They organized mass flower-laying ceremonies and displayed mourning messages on large screens in various Russian cities. They lowered flags on shops and cafes. Emotional messages about the deaths were immediately followed by political slogans, although the heroes of these propaganda stories were describing facts. And interestingly, none of them blamed the armed forces of Ukraine. They simply said, a tragedy has occurred. Now, the main point, when talking about the students who died or were injured, Russians constantly use the word child or children. This is a deliberate manipulation because an 18-year-old is no longer a child. And he should make a conscious decision, especially understanding that there are clearly military activities happening in that same building. And here another interesting inconsistency appears. For some reason, only 2 days later, on May 24, so-called foreign journalists were brought to the site of the strike. Among them were mostly bloggers loyal to the Kremlin with a documented history of promoting Kremlin narratives. For example, Chebos, that is a Russia Today correspondent who just happens to be from Ireland. And then there's Saad Khalaf. He is an Al Arabiya correspondent in Moscow with a record of Russia-accredited trips to the front line. Giovanni Pini, an Italian journalist who lives and works in Russia, and he covers Russia's war against Ukraine. But interestingly, even among the journalists in Starobilsk who are completely loyal to the Kremlin, there were some who didn't believe the Russians. Well, for example, the propagandists from Luhansk complained about a journalist from Italy, who for some reason, they say, kept adding the word allegedly when describing the events at the college dormitory. Once again, the Russians decided to show only one building after the strike, but they flatly refused to show journalists what happened in the second college, and why the dormitory was affected. And that's not all. That's why there was also an opinion that those who died in the dormitory were not future teachers or future kindergarten educators, but drone operators who were undergoing training. This conclusion was made based on the fact that in the Chelyabinsk region, girls were recruited for the positions of drone operators in the Rubikon unit. And what these two facts have in common is that Rubikon really did recruit girls specifically. And most of those who died in the dormitory in Starobilsk were also girls. And the day before, girls really were being recruited in Starobilsk to become drone operators for that very same Rubikon. What conclusion can we draw from all this? The tragedy in Starobilsk is a cruel but very sobering proof of exactly who Ukraine is fighting against. For the Kremlin, people in the occupied territories, even children and teenagers, are expendable. They're not their own people, as they say. No. They are a human shield behind which Russian soldiers hide their radars, drone headquarters, and so on, knowing that eventually something will hit there. And when something does hit there, they don't rush to save people, no. The first thing they do is bring cameras there to exploit the dead for propaganda. And what do you think? Write in the comments, let's discuss this topic openly. Thank you for watching this episode until the end. Take care of yourselves and see you next time.
Let the military try to shoot at their own people with us directly behind them. Let them try to shoot at women and children with us right there, not 3 rows back.
Let them try to shoot at women and children with us standing behind them, not 3 rows behind. Let them try to shoot at women and children with us standing behind them, not behind a row.